On a stormy evening in 1971, a man boarded a flight in Portland, Oregon. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. He carried a briefcase, wore a suit, and ordered a bourbon and soda. Hours later, he vanished mid-flight, parachuting into the night with $200,000 in ransom money. No one has seen him since. The FBI chased him for decades. They never caught him. This is the story of the only unsolved hijacking in U.S. aviation history. It was late afternoon on November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. The skies over Portland were overcast, the airport bustling with holiday travelers. But among the ordinary passengers that day stood a man who didn't quite fit in. He approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter with quiet confidence. No checked baggage, no ID was required in those days. He simply gave his name as Dan Cooper, paid in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, $20. Boarding Flight 305, he was polite, calm. Nothing about him drew attention. Witnesses would later describe him as around 5'10" to 6 feet tall, mid-40s, neatly dressed in a black raincoat, a dark suit, white shirt, black tie, and loafers. He wore sunglasses inside the aircraft. Nobody questioned it. He ordered a bourbon and soda, paid cash, and lit a cigarette. Back then, smoking on flights was not only allowed, it was expected. Everything seemed normal until he handed a folded note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She slipped it into her purse without reading it. "Miss," Cooper said, leaning in slightly, voice low but firm, "you'd better read that. I have a bomb." Shocked but composed, Florence sat down. Cooper leaned over and quietly opened the briefcase just enough to reveal red cylinders and wires, what appeared to be dynamite. He wasn't bluffing. At least she didn't think so. Cooper dictated his demands with eerie precision. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane for a nonstop flight to Mexico City. He wanted everything ready when they landed. No tricks. Or, he said, he would detonate the bomb. Flight 305 was just 30 minutes from Seattle, but it didn't descend. Instead, the pilots, under FBI orders, circled over Puget Sound, while law enforcement scrambled on the ground. Below them, chaos unfolded. FBI agents, state police, airport officials, all racing against time to gather the money and parachutes. But in the sky inside that cabin, everything was quiet. Almost too quiet. Cooper remained calm, unshaken. He made small talk with the crew, asked for more bourbon, smoked another cigarette, never once raised his voice. He wasn't nervous, Schaffner later recalled. He seemed thoughtful, like he had a plan. Whoever he was, Cooper was in control. Not just of the plane, but of every move the FBI was about to make. And as the aircraft circled the darkening skies of Washington state, a strange truth began to settle in. This hijacker wasn't desperate. He was deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. As Flight 305 circled the skies above Seattle, the ground below moved into crisis mode. FBI agents, airline executives, and local law enforcement assembled a war room inside the airport. This wasn't just a hijacking, it was the first of its kind, and every decision had to be perfect. Cooper had demanded $200,000 in cash, equivalent to over $1.4 million today. But he was specific. Unmarked $20 bills. The FBI rushed to gather the money from several Seattle banks. Each bill was photographed and its serial number logged, over 10,000 bills in total. The bills were bundled in bank wrappers and packed into a civilian backpack, just as Cooper requested. At the same time, agents secured 4 parachutes, 2 front packs and 2 backpacks from a local skydiving school. Here's where things get interesting. The FBI initially tried to trick Cooper by giving him non-functional military parachutes. But when he rejected them, they quickly substituted civilian sport parachutes. One of the reserve chutes was even a training dummy, sewn shut and unusable. Why they included it remains a mystery. Inside the plane, time crawled. The passengers, unaware of the true situation, were told their landing was delayed due to minor mechanical issues. Cooper, meanwhile, remained calm. He was polite to the flight attendants, never abusive, never frantic. It was business, not chaos. At 5:39 p.m., 2 hours after takeoff, Flight 305 finally landed at SeaTac Airport. Cooper ordered the pilot to taxi to a remote, well-lit section of the tarmac, far from the terminal. The cabin lights were dimmed, curtains were drawn, no snipers, no tricks. Under Cooper's strict instructions, a single airline employee approached the rear of the aircraft with the money and parachutes. Cooper peered out the window, checked the packages, and gave the signal. In exchange, Cooper released all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants. The cabin was now almost empty. Only the pilots, flight engineer Harold Anderson, and attendant Tina Mucklow remained. And of course, Cooper. Now came the next phase of the plan. Cooper instructed the pilots. They would fly to Mexico City. The plane was to maintain a low altitude, 10,000 feet, fly slow, with the landing gear down and the cabin unpressurized. This was no sightseeing tour. He was preparing for something. He was meticulous. He refused to take off until he confirmed every detail: heading, altitude, fuel load. He even specified the flap setting, 15 degrees. That's not random. That's a detail only someone with flight knowledge would know. The plane was refueled under Cooper's watchful eye. Any delay, any deviation, and he threatened to blow the aircraft sky high. But still, he remained eerily calm. By 7:40 p.m., the plane was ready. Cooper gave one last instruction: stay on a south-southeast course toward Mexico City. The cabin lights dimmed again. The rear air stairs, unusual for a commercial aircraft, remained unlocked. The crew prepared for takeoff. As the aircraft climbed into the cold night, one thing was certain: the hijacker now had everything he asked for. But what no one realized was that Cooper was just getting started. At exactly 7:40 p.m., Northwest Orient Flight 305 lifted off from Seattle-Tacoma Airport. It carried 5 souls, 3 crew members, 1 flight attendant, and 1 ghost in the making, D.B. Cooper. Cooper had given strict instructions. The aircraft was to fly low, no higher than 10,000 feet, landing gear down, flaps set at 15 degrees, cabin depressurized, heading south-southeast toward Mexico City, speed kept below 200 knots. These were not arbitrary commands. Cooper was setting up for a very specific maneuver, one almost no civilian would know was even possible. The Boeing 727 was one of the few commercial aircraft with an aft stairway that could be lowered in flight. Cooper knew that. The FBI would later admit they didn't. Tina Mucklow was the only crew member allowed to stay in the cabin with him. She described him as calm, focused. He spoke rarely now. His voice remained composed, deliberate. He checked the parachutes, removed one from its casing, sorted through the cords. Then he asked Tina to join the rest of the crew in the cockpit and stay there. It was the last time anyone saw D.B. Cooper. Minutes passed. Then at precisely 8:13 p.m., an unusual signal lit up on the cockpit panel, a rapid change in cabin pressure. At the same moment, the aircraft pitched slightly upward, like someone had just exited from the rear. The pilots knew. The aft stairs had been lowered, and someone had left the aircraft. Outside the plane, the weather was brutal. It was 36 degrees Fahrenheit, winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour, visibility near zero, and yet Cooper had jumped. With him, he took the money, $200,000 in tightly wrapped bills, and 1 parachute strapped to his back. He wore only a business suit, loafers, and a thin trench coat. No helmet, no gloves, no GPS. Just a man falling into blackness, somewhere over the wilderness near the Washington-Oregon border. The crew didn't dare leave the cockpit. For all they knew, the hijacker was still aboard. They stayed locked up until they were cleared to land at their next stop, Reno, Nevada. At 10:15 p.m., Flight 305 touched down in Reno. FBI agents swarmed the aircraft but found only empty seats and 4 shaken crew members. Cooper was gone, and with him so was the ransom. Inside the plane, they found a black clip-on tie, a tie pin, and 8 filter-tipped Raleigh cigarette butts. Nothing else. Cooper had taken everything else with him, including the note. He had left behind no wallet, no fingerprints, no ID, not even a parachute ripcord. Somewhere out there, in the wilderness below, either Cooper landed and vanished, or his body and the money lay hidden in a forest so vast it could swallow a man whole. The FBI launched one of the most extensive manhunts in American history. But by the time their boots hit the ground, the trail was already cold. By dawn on November 25, 1971, D.B. Cooper had been missing for nearly 10 hours. The jump zone, somewhere between Seattle and Reno, spanned hundreds of square miles of rugged terrain: forest, rivers, mountains, rain-soaked farmland, no lights, no landmarks, no safe landing spots. And yet, Cooper had vanished into it like smoke. The FBI scrambled. They worked with the Air Force, the FAA, and Northwest Orient. Flight data, radar logs, wind direction, pilot testimonies, every detail was analyzed. The goal: pinpoint the exact location where Cooper likely jumped. Eventually, they triangulated a rough estimate, somewhere near the small town of Ariel, Washington. Remote, wooded, and difficult to search. It became ground zero for the manhunt. Hundreds of searchers, National Guard, sheriff's deputies, FBI agents hit the ground. Helicopters skimmed treetops, planes scanned from above, boats searched the Lewis River. They were looking for anything: parachute fabric, footprints, a duffel bag full of cash, or a body. But day after day they came up empty. No broken trees, no drag marks, no chute, no man. It was as if Cooper had jumped into another dimension. Back at FBI headquarters in Seattle, agents began building a profile. Cooper was calm, calculated, not reckless. He drank bourbon, smoked filter-tipped cigarettes, spoke politely, used aviation terminology, possibly military, possibly ex-Air Force, possibly dead. The flight crew and remaining passengers were extensively interviewed. Their descriptions led to a composite sketch, one that would become iconic. A man in sunglasses, clean-shaven, with a receding hairline and a knowing expression. The media swarmed the story. It was sensational. A man hijacks a plane, escapes with $200,000 and vanishes midair. The public was hooked. The name Dan Cooper was mistakenly reported as D.B. Cooper by a newswire error, and it stuck. Tips poured in from around the country. Thousands claimed to know D.B. Cooper or to be him. The FBI followed every lead. They interviewed truck drivers, librarians, war veterans, drifters. They checked skydiving schools, military records, even psychiatric hospitals. But every lead dried up. Every theory hit a wall. Either Cooper didn't survive the fall, or he had pulled off the most precise disappearance in American criminal history. As winter settled over Washington, the official search was called off. No body, no parachute, no trace. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole, and the FBI had nothing. Weeks turned into months, months into years, and still no sign of Cooper. But then, nearly a decade later, a clue surfaced that reignited the mystery like dry tinder catching flame. It was February 1980. Brian Ingram, just 8 years old, was on a camping trip with his family near Tina Bar on the Columbia River in southern Washington. As he dug in the sand, he hit something strange: bundles of decaying, tightly packed $20 bills. The total? $5,800. 3 bundles, badly deteriorated, but the serial numbers matched. It was part of the ransom, the first and only confirmed trace of D.B. Cooper's money ever found. But if the money landed here, why wasn't Cooper nearby? Had he buried it, dropped it midair, or had the river carried it from another location entirely? The FBI was no closer to knowing. The find raised more questions than it answered. The case became a magnet for theories and theorists. Over the decades, more than 800 suspects would be considered, some plausible, most not, but a few stood out. Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army pilot and skydiver, hijacked a plane in 1972 using nearly identical methods: fake grenade, parachute escape, ransom demand. He even used a 727. Was it the same man? McCoy was eventually caught and killed in a shootout after escaping from prison, but the FBI ruled him out as Cooper. The physical descriptions didn't quite match. He was younger, sloppier, too brash. Cooper was methodical, in control, a different breed. Then there was Duane Weber. On his deathbed in 1995, he reportedly confessed to his wife, "I'm Dan Cooper." She said he had nightmares about jumping from planes. He had an old knee injury, possibly from a hard landing, and strangely, his name showed up in the margins of FBI files. But handwriting samples didn't match. No fingerprints linked him to the plane. Another theory that went nowhere. In the 2010s, a new favorite emerged: Robert Rackstraw. Decorated veteran, helicopter pilot, paratrooper, accused con man. He had the skills, the background, the attitude. Some claimed he left cryptic messages in old letters sent to newspapers, ciphers pointing to his name. Others said he liked teasing investigators, playing the cat to their mouse. But Rackstraw denied everything until his death in 2019. Dozens more names made the list. Vietnam vets, career criminals, airline workers, each theory had pieces that fit until they didn't. What about the money found at Tina Bar? If Cooper dropped it during the jump, why did it surface almost 10 years later? Why were only a few bundles recovered? Did he try to bury it? Did he die out there in the trees, never found? Or did he get away clean and plant that money to throw investigators off the scent? Years later, scientists discovered tiny particles on Cooper's tie, titanium, bismuth, rare metals used in aerospace manufacturing in the early 70s. Had Cooper worked in a Boeing plant, a military contractor, someone with deep knowledge and access? The deeper you dig into the Cooper mystery, the stranger it gets. Every clue feels like it's leading somewhere, but every trail fades just before the truth. Time passed, leads faded, witnesses aged. The urgency of the search slowed, but the fascination never did. D.B. Cooper had become more than a suspect. He was an American legend, a mystery no badge could solve, a ghost that haunted the case files of the FBI. For decades, agents pored over every detail. New agents took over as old ones retired. The same sketches hung on new office walls, the same maps, the same questions, with no answers. Agents like Larry Carr, assigned to the case in the early 2000s, gave it everything they had. They followed new science, DNA tests, particle analysis, re-interviewed witnesses, tried to find that one missing thread, but every angle hit a wall. The case was like chasing fog. Then after 45 years, on July 8, 2016, the FBI officially closed the NORJAK case. Not solved, just shelved. They announced they were reallocating resources to prioritize other investigative needs. The mystery was no longer an active pursuit. It was the longest and most exhaustive investigation in Bureau history. Over 800 suspects, tens of thousands of pages of evidence, and not one confirmed identity, not one confirmed sighting, not even a body. D.B. Cooper had pulled off the impossible and gotten away with it. He'd become a symbol, not just of crime, but of perfect escape. A man who used cunning, not violence, intelligence, not chaos. He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't gloat. He didn't even spend the money, at least as far as we know. Did he die in the jump? Is his skeleton out there, tangled in the branches of some forgotten forest? Or did he live and simply blend back into society? Quiet, invisible, watching the myth grow while the world searched in the wrong direction. Even with the case closed, the story never ended. New theorists emerge every year. Some chase it with data, others with obsession. It's become folklore, half manhunt, half campfire story. D.B. Cooper didn't just hijack a plane, he hijacked the American imagination. 50 years later, one question still hangs in the air, unanswered, untouched, undefeated. No one knows. Not the FBI, not the airlines, not the amateur sleuths or the retired agents or the conspiracy theorists combing message boards. Whoever he was, he walked into history with nothing but a briefcase and a plan, and walked out a legend. Maybe Cooper didn't want to be found. Maybe that was the point. Not to steal the money, but to escape the system one final time on his terms. And if that's true, maybe the mystery isn't a flaw in the case. Maybe it's the design. If you enjoyed this investigation, if you want more stories about the untold, the unsolved, and the unbelievable, subscribe to this channel. Tap the bell icon and drop your theory in the comments. Do you think D.B. Cooper survived, or is he buried beneath the trees in the Oregon wilderness? Because this story isn't over. Not really. It's just waiting for the next clue to surface. If you're intrigued by unsolved mysteries and chilling cases, check out my playlist, True Crime Murders and Disappearances, for more unsolved cases.